Recently, I was watching a North Face snowboarding video made by Sherpa Cinema called Defiance. The films that the North Face sponsor and Sherpa Cinema create are always top-notch, with incredibly humanizing stories and awe-inspiring images. But this one was different. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, among shots using helicopters and extremely expensive cinema cameras, it cuts to a vertical video from what I can only assume is an iPhone, of Jake Blauvelt using an exercise band as Leanne Pelosi laughs. Throughout the rest of the video, there are more and more iPhone clips, from dipping into a frozen lake, selfies in the helicopter, and singing along to Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads. What was fascinating to me as I watched this video was that it was the first time I've ever seen vertical video used in a professional production like this, and I didn't instantly get mad that I just saw a vertical video. But why didn't I get mad, as the world tells me that I should have? Why did it work in this video and not others? In this video essay, we're going to explore the origins of aspect ratios used for video and talk about where vertical video fits into our world today. If you're watching this, you're likely under the age of about 30 or 35. That means that you likely spend just as much time or more on your cell phone as you do in front of a TV. And that means that you're already very familiar with this growing tension within our digital lives, horizontal and vertical video. All of your social media feeds scroll vertically. Facebook is now optimizing for vertical content. Snapchat has always been vertical, TikTok is, and YouTube offered support for vertical video all the way back in 2015. Instagram started optimizing for vertical content a few years ago and took it even further last year with the release of IGTV. But our computers, TVs, movie screens, and traditional cameras, all horizontal. With social media becoming more and more integrated within our digital lives, these tensions, or rather frustrations, dealing with two very prominent and very different ways of creating and consuming video content, are only going to continue to boil over. So how did the standard for video become horizontal in the first place? And what's the future of vertical video content look like? Interestingly enough, one of the very first moving images ever created was shot vertically. Falling Cat by Etienne Jules Marie was created in 1894 in order to show how cats are much better at landing on their feet than other animals. Vertical formats for other artistic mediums existed well before video came along. Paintings, drawings, and stained glass windows all existed in formats that are taller than they are wide, well before moving images came along. So why did video end up being standardized to a horizontal format? Some say it's because our eyes are horizontal, which is true, but doesn't actually have anything to do with the history and evolution of video aspect ratios. The format of Falling Cat didn't stick, and the roots of video formats we have today trace all the way back to William Kennedy Dixon. Dixon was working for Thomas Edison as a photographer. Using the 35mm size we're familiar with, Dixon decided on a frame size of 4 perforations tall. This ended up being 0.95 inches tall and 0.735 inches wide. And this was the 4:3 aspect ratio. This seemingly arbitrary decision was largely made for economic reasons. The film then in use was twice the size of 35mm, and by effectively cutting it in half, it allowed more film stock to be available for cinematic experimentations. When sound was added to movies in the 1920s, it was printed on a tiny sliver of the frame the video was recorded onto. This meant that the aspect ratio had to change in order to make the soundtrack fit. This new aspect ratio was about 1.19 to 1, rather than 1.33 or 4:3. Many cinemas and production houses tried to reformat to 1.33 individually, but there was no great way to do it. Film aspect ratios changed quite a lot in the late 20s, and multiple formats were adopted by different groups and production companies. But on May 9, 1932, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences agreed on a projection plate opening size of 0.825 inches by 0.6, which created an aspect ratio of 1.375 to 1. This has been dubbed the Academy ratio and was the standard up until 1952. When TV first came to consumers, it made intuitive sense to manufacture them with roughly a 1.3 aspect ratio, as that was the standard for movies. But this created a new problem for production companies and movie theaters. People were just watching movies at home, and thus Cinerama was born. This new format shot on 3 cameras simultaneously, a 35mm film that was exposed 6 perforations high rather than 4. This new format shot in an aspect ratio of 2.35 to 1, and this ultra widescreen experience was created to draw people back into movie theaters and was an instant hit. The invention of Cinerama spurred a war of different widescreen formats, all with their own slightly different aspect ratios and challenges both within production and projection. Some of the big production formats were CinemaScope, VistaVision, and Super Panavision, but we won't go much deeper than that. Just know that throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there were all kinds of different widescreen formats, meant to provide moviegoers with a unique experience they couldn't get at home. But none of these aspect ratios were the ones that we're familiar with today, 16:9, or 1.77:1. So where did that come from? The answer is a lot less ethereal and artistic than you'd like to think it is. As the standards for high-definition video were being discussed in the 1980s, Kearns Powers, working for RCA at the time and a member of the Society of Motion Picture Engineers, proposed 16:9 because it was the mean of the two most common non-anamorphic aspect ratios at the time. According to a paper written by Mark Schubin, a prolific cinema expert and technologist. As a proposed electronic production format, 16:9 need not ever have been used in a shoot and protect mode. Given sufficient resolution, a 16:9 electronic image could be used to capture a single aspect ratio in any desired aspect ratio. And there is no clear evidence of an aesthetic or physiological reason to choose any one aspect ratio over another. For the particular ranges of aspect ratios between 4.3 and 2.5:1, a display shape of approximately 16:9 will require the least aspect ratio accommodation for both extremes of the range. Remember this video?
Meh.
This video didn't have to look this way. It could have been prevented. Say no to vertical videos.
Vertical videos happen when you hold your camera the wrong way. Your video will end up looking like crap.
It was released in 2012, as about 50% of US adults were using social media. At this point, vertical video existed purely because of the convenience of recording it and sharing it on other smartphones. Many people were still being intentional in recording video horizontally, because that was still the norm. This was right after Snapchat was released and much before social media started optimizing for vertical content. And the original video has been taken down, but as of 2018, it had more than 8 million views, 130,000 plus likes, and more than 5,000 comments, indicating that the faux public service announcement really hit a nerve.
Vertical videos happen when you hold your camera the wrong way.
Notice how they say camera, but both of the devices shown are smartphones. What's interesting here is that the creators of this video were still thinking of the camera function of smartphones as imitating or taking the place of consumer point-and-shoot cameras. While this has largely become true, the idea that this one device serves the purpose of two while remaining mutually exclusive has gone by the wayside, which in retrospect seems inevitable. Cell phone cameras have amazing quality, but their first purpose is not being a camera, it's being a device to share and communicate, and one of those ways is through video. The smartphone is one device that does everything. It doesn't have mutually exclusive functions. Smartphone users largely create and share content with the intention of that content also being viewed on a smartphone. What format makes the most sense given the affordances of these devices and social media? Vertical. They're stories we can't interact with in our daily lives, and we can learn about other people and the world around us. Why exactly does it matter what aspect ratio it is if we're still getting an enjoyable experience, given the affordances of the devices and platforms we're using? Fritz Henle, a prolific German photographer during the 20th century, said, "The right angle is the one which pictures the reality of a subject, its real essence. As long as we're correctly serving the purpose and audience of our content, it shouldn't matter." Now I'd like to return to the premise of this project, the Defiance video. Why did vertical video work then and not before? It all has to do with timing and the rhetorical notion of Kairos. Kairos is an ancient Greek word meaning the opportune and decisive moment. For the last 3 or 4 years, Instagram has taken off as the platform for athletes to share what they're up to. And as Instagram has taken stories from Snapchat, there are 2 ways athletes share content. Posts hold more permanency and can be seen as more professional, whereas stories have a 24-hour lifespan and are often seen as more casual or intimate. I've been consuming enough story content from these professional athletes that their social affordances and connotations of vertical content carried over to a more traditional format and enhanced the experience rather than taking away from it. This was the opportune time for Sherpa Cinema to include vertical content. It brought a whole different dimension to the video, and partially rupturing the fourth wall like this is genius. Kathleen Ryan, a professor at CU Boulder, in a paper discussing vertical video, draws on the words of filmmaker and researcher Mark Schleser, saying these new mediums operate in between photography, video, and the internet while simultaneously establishing new links. The mobile device is a case of media converging in a spectacle of information and data, where the division between the media forms seem blurred, but when the location of consumption emphasizes the original experience. Mobile devices push the media experiences into a new domain. Vertical video is simply its own new medium and need not be in constant conflict with the horizontal video that we're used to. The vertical video debate seems more like a classic case of rejecting change for the comfort and convenience of tradition. But let's follow the lead of Sherpa Cinema and explore what's possible with these new affordances.